We now come to the Oration, and it is my honour to invite Tánaiste Leo Varadkar TD to deliver the centenary Collins Griffith Oration.
Mr. McEntee, Caoirleach and Shannon, members of the Oireachtas, Deputy Lord Mayor, Commissioner Harris, Major General McKenna, members of the Defence Forces, friends and colleagues. First of all, on behalf of all of us, I want to extend my thanks to William Lavelle and the Collins Griffith Commemoration Society for organising this centenary commemoration and for making sure that the founders of our state are remembered and honoured every day. We're also grateful to our Defence Forces for taking part today. Our Defence Forces trace a proud lineage back to the Irish Volunteers, Ógie na hÉireann, and for 100 years they have defended the state which Collins and Griffith gave their lives to achieve a century ago. When laying the wreath earlier, I was struck by the thought that it was probably a Sunday in August, one very like this one, 100 years ago, that word began to travel slowly across the country that President Griffith had died suddenly the day before. Clearly distraught, Michael Collins described it as a calamity for Ireland and reflected on the malignant fate which seemed to dog our country throughout our history, that every time a leader emerged who was trusted by the people, they were taken from us. Giving some examples, Collins named Thomas Davis, Charles Stewart Parnell, and now Arthur Griffith. The great tragedy which he could not have known was that within a few short days, his own name will be added to the pantheon of lost leaders. Earlier we watched Minister McEntee lay a wreath at the grave of Eamon Duggan, a crucial figure in the peace process which culminated in the signing and ratification of the Anglo-Irish Treaty. Duggan was from County Armagh, and he passionately believed that Irish unity could only be achieved through compromise, through communication, and through consent. An Ulsterman, he supported the treaty because it knew it provided the best means to achieve the dream that he'd been fighting for since he took his position at the North Dublin Union in 1916. Duggan went on to serve with distinction in many Cumann na Gael governments, including in the Department of Home Affairs, now the Department of Justice. His life was dedicated to peace and reconciliation on the island, and he courageously worked to turn the dream of freedom into reality. And I think it is right that we honour him today. We also honour Michael Collins, the person who more so than anyone made possible the Ireland that we live in today. In 7 days' time at Balaam Law, we'll witness something unique in the history of commemoration of his life and legacy. The leaders of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, the two political parties which emerged from the shattered political movement founded by Arthur Griffith more than a century ago, will come together to pay tribute to Michael Collins and the Ireland he did so much to create. It will be a powerful statement of how far our politics has come, the wounds which have been healed, and the reminder that the bold prophecies of freedom 100 years ago are still being fulfilled. At Balaam Law, I'll pay tribute to someone who has been a personal as well as political inspiration and whose example continues to guide me and so many in our political family. The entire life of Michael Collins was a profile in courage. He had the courage to take on the British Empire despite overwhelming odds and to force it to the negotiating table. He had the courage to risk his reputation and his life by working to secure peace and then persuade the majority of people in the Dáil and also in the country to support it. Most importantly, he had the courage to believe in his fellow countrymen and countrywomen. He had faith in the future, and he trusted that perhaps what he was not able to achieve, future generations would. That is a remarkable legacy, and one that continues to motivate and inspire us today. Dear friends, it will be a significant moment when Nora Owen and Major General McKenna lay wreaths at his grave after this oration. We'll see a distinguished former Minister for Justice, who was a grandniece of Michael Collins, joined with the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Defence Forces to pay tribute to Ireland's iconic hero, our soldier politician, on behalf of a grateful nation. We also remembered the work of the Dublin Cemeteries Trust in looking after this important place for the current and future generations. And I'd like to make a special mention of those who place flowers on the grave here every week: Jim Langton, Lynn Brady, Ronnie Daly, Paul Fleming, Paul Cleary, Brendan Hickey, Terry Cosby, and the late Dennis Lennon. As we know, Michael Collins was heartbroken at the death of Arthur Griffith and hailed him as the father of us all. I suspect he'd be even more upset at the way Griffith has been largely forgotten by so many who enjoy the freedoms and live in the state that he gave his life to secure. So today I'd like to use this oration to recall our enormous debt to him and to help reclaim his memory for this 21st century. Griffith's devotion to the cause of Irish freedom and independence can be seen in the medical report of his death. His own doctor revealed that he'd pleaded with him to take a rest, even a short break, for many years, but to no avail. He was just 51 years of age, reported the doctor, and I can safely say he had not a holiday for 30 years. People recognised that Griffith died a martyr to duty. People on all sides of a very bitter civil war split were shocked at the news. Shanti O'Kelly, a future President of Ireland, was at the time a prisoner of the Irish Free State in Kilmainham jail. But he wrote to Griffith's widow to say that future generations of Irish men and women would draw inspiration from how Griffith had raised the nation from its knees and rekindled in their hearts the almost extinct flame of liberty. Erskine Childers, who fell out with Griffith over the treaty, described him as the revolutionary movement's greatest intellectual force. He understood that the national revival, which took place between 1916 and 1919, owed everything to Griffith's organisation and ability. During the revolutionary period, the quest for independence and self-determination was brought to life by brave dreamers who imagined a future, articulated what it would look like, and then worked to make it a reality. Our freedom and independence was won by leaders of thought as well as leaders of action. In Michael Collins we have the leader of action, who made the flame burn so fiercely that it seared and terrified those who tried to extinguish it. In Arthur Griffith, we had a leader of thought, who helped bring the flame of liberty into existence, protected it during times of darkness, and then made it catch fire across the country. As we know, this year is also the centenary of the publication of James Joyce's masterpiece, Ulysses. Joyce admired Griffith greatly and believed the United Irishman was the only newspaper worth reading in Dublin at the time. In the Ireland of 1904, when Ulysses is set, Griffith was a rather marginal figure. Very few at the time shared his conviction that Ireland could become an independent state, let alone within 20 years, and fewer his passionate belief that it could be successful and prosperous. In the years that followed, when Griffith made his case that Irish MPs should withdraw from Westminster and establish their own parliament in Dublin, he was seen as a dreamer, and to be honest, a little bit of a crank. He founded the original Sinn Féin party, proposing a dual monarchy between Britain and Ireland as a pragmatic solution before reaffirming his republicanism. A republic was certainly his preference, but he understood that it might not be attainable in phase one, as we might describe it today. Like the other members of Sinn Féin at the time, he took no part in the Easter Rising. He opposed socialism and communism and advocated for the independence of Egypt and India. A Dubliner born not too far from here, he was the TD for Cavan, a House of Commons MP for Tyrone, a member of the Northern Ireland Parliament for Fermanagh and Tyrone, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister for Home Affairs, and President of Dáil Éireann. 3 parliaments and 3 ministries, quite something for any one man. Throughout long years of struggle, Griffith never lost heart. He never wavered in his belief, and he never stopped working for freedom. His greatness was the way he made his case so convincingly for almost 20 years, bringing people with him and taking advantage of the changing political circumstances to put his ideas finally into operation. When Ireland needed a new message of freedom, he provided it in his writings and newspapers. When Ireland needed a new political movement, he created it. When Ireland needed a diplomat and a negotiator, he stepped up and led the delegation in London and brought home a deal that gave us a state of our own and gave Ireland the freedom to achieve freedom. And when Ireland needed an experienced and able politician, he provided it as President of Dáil Éireann of the Irish Free State. As Professor Michael Laffan has written, Griffith was a formidable editor and journalist, the founder of a party which dominated Irish politics between 1918 and 1922, and a staunch champion of democratic values and institutions. The early part of the 20th century was an age of great anxiety. But here in Ireland, Griffith turned it into an age of belief. Using the media, he educated, informed and inspired, persuading his readers of the opportunities that freedom would bring, economically, socially and politically. And he shared his dream of freedom and inspired others to share it too. As we all know, the name Sinn Féin has been used in more recent times by those who've never understood the principles for which people like Griffith and Collins gave their lives, nor tried to follow them. Both were pragmatic men who understood the need for compromise, that change would often be incremental, and neither believed that there was no alternative to violence or war. I believe that Griffith's vision for Ireland was truly broad and inclusive. He met with unionist leaders because he knew that the starting point for any discussion on a shared island had to be, in his words, fair play for all sections and understanding between all sections. Principles as relevant today as they were 100 years ago. It was not a narrow nationalism, not just about sovereignty and symbols. As Professor Laffan also wrote, another distinguishing feature of his beliefs was his particular interest, if not preoccupation, with the economic aspects of Irish independence, and his determination that Ireland should be a modern and prosperous state. As head of the delegation, he was pivotal in ensuring that the treaty gave Ireland full fiscal sovereignty and full control of our own trade policy. It's therefore hard to know what he would have thought of European integration and the single market, the customs union, the single currency, and indeed our embrace of multilateralism today. Griffith was also a champion of equality, at least in the context of the time. And scholars such as Professor Colin Kenny have shown, backing the cause of women's suffrage early on and giving women a platform to publish in his newspapers, which was unusual at the time. He could also be fierce in defence of those who were wronged. When a newspaper published a disgraceful and sexist attack on Maud Gonne, he was jailed for horsewhipping the editor. Dear friends, colleagues and comrades, commemorations are a way of connecting to the past. That's really important for a country. It's an act of respect, but also an act of humility, a reminder that we owe so much to the dead generations who made the world that we live in possible. The 1916 proclamation was our ashling of freedom. The treaty and the constitutions that followed turned poetry into prose. They give us a bold vision that call on all of us to play our part in achieving it. It still does, it remains unfulfilled, and the work goes on. Too many sacrificed their lives so that we could enjoy freedom, democracy, and independence as we do today. Too many sacrificed their lives to give us the state that we have today, with 100 years of independence, unbroken democracy, and rule of law. Only a handful of countries in the world have experienced this. Today we honour them best by living up to their ideals, by rededicating our lives to the service of others, and by remembering that despite our differences, our common cause is the betterment of Ireland. Ar yeiste go raibh anam dílis, ar míle agah go léir.
Thank you, Tánaiste, for those very those very fine words, and thank you for your attendance here today.